Let me again welcome Dr. Cherif Amir, Professor of International Relations. Again, thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
Yes, the whole world has been passing through unprecedented developments, particularly during the past 2 years, 3 years, starting 2020. But on the political arena, we've seen dramatic developments, particularly starting 2022. Let me see how you read the scene, and then we'll be speaking about how Egypt dealt with each and every situation.
Well, after the collapse of the Soviet Union, at a certain time, we heard the Americans talking about the New World Order. I think that we are living now in something else than the American meant. It's a New World Order, but it's not like they wanted to see. We're witnessing a new map of the world. We're witnessing new powers emerging. The world is changing. It won't be a wonder if the UN itself would be renewed. We are living now in an era where each country has to strengthen its position on its own territory, strengthen its sovereignty, and make alliances, especially economic alliances. And when I speak about economic alliances, let's not forget that we are witnessing now the greatest war against the dollar. So the currency of the world, which is the dollar, is being now attacked by every force now seeking to have sovereignty. So if I read the situation, I'm telling you clearly that we are not living in a third world war, as some people say, but let's say a new era of new world order. And this world order won't be easy or easily created. It would take many efforts from many countries, such as Egypt, South Africa, China, India, Russia. Many countries will work together to find a place in this world, because we have lived in a lie that they used to tell us the world community, or let's say the international community. And we discovered when I studied in the School of Law and the international law, they used to tell us the international community. Well, in fact, what was the international community? About 30% of the world, maybe less, it's the West. It's Europe, Western Europe and the United States. What about the rest of the world? What about South America, Asia, Africa? So I think that now we are waking up from all that, and we are saying, well, the world is not only the Western Hemisphere. The world is also other parts. And maybe this is what the Russians called at a certain time multipolar forces that should be created in every region. They specified, for example, in the Middle East, Egypt, Israel, Turkey, and then South Africa in the south, and Brazil and Argentina in South America. No one policeman for the world anymore. This is the whole story and the Europeans are stuck in that because they're in the middle. They don't want to be real followers to the United States, but in the same time, they have this culture of, let's say, not colonialism, but this culture of homogeneity, of controlling the others, controlling Africa, controlling Asia. So they are the weakest part in all this game.
We have gone far backwards, but let me just, in few words, it's a reshape for the whole world order. Yeah. And what we are witnessing is truly new alliances that are emerging in a world that needs very strong countries in order to survive. Right. So, speaking about the situations and different situations that has emerged and that has Egypt been dealing with, particularly this very, very particular war of Russia, Ukraine, that has a determined or should be determining the upcoming stage, and how this reflected on the policies of all real players on the ground.
Well, the Russians were very clear from the beginning. They do not wish to see anymore one ruler of the world, which is the United States.
No monopoly.
Yes. Well, as Hillary Clinton called it, the policeman of the world, and she was proud of that. They do not wish to see this policeman of the world advising and giving, not advising, even giving orders to everyone. So when they approached through NATO to threaten Russia, they were surprised at a certain time that someone said no, and what was Vladimir Putin, who said no, and then the war started. So what we're witnessing today is that there is this willingness inside Russia, inside China also, because let's say that the war in Ukraine now is not only Russia and Ukraine, it's the West with all their capitals and rulers, Central Europe, and also Asia, which is China, India, and Russia. And even the Arab world trying to have its place in this equation. So the Russians are now betting that if economically they will survive, and I think that they're doing well now, despite of the sanctions, because they have controlled all the eastern part of Ukraine, which has the mines.
Yes, but how this reflected on the world? Because yes, we understand that this war took place to change the situation a little bit and make a kind of balance to power in the whole world. However, they were pushed into that war. But
who?
The Russians. But what we understand now is there is a trial for balancing the situation, particularly from the Russian and Chinese side. How this reflected on the whole world? How did it reflected on the how the rest of the world grasped such war, and how did that reflect on them on the ground?
Well, I will rephrase my words again, because I just said the idea is that we are living into this kind of earthquake, geopolitical earthquake,
yes.
And forces are emerging. We are affected economically, yes. We are affected in security questions. We are affected by all this reshaping of the world. That's why I said at the beginning, every country has to strengthen its sovereignty first and then make alliances. So this is the effect. We are not apart from this world. In Egypt, we suffered economically because of what's taking place. Yeah. But in the same time, we cannot just say, well, we have to be neutral and all that. We started saying also to our friends and partners in the West that we have sovereignty, and you have to understand our message. We would not take part into this camp against the others. And all the Arab world said so. We said we will work with the Russians, and if you're willing to work with us, we will work with you. Look, for example, today, the meeting that President Sisi had with the Norwegian company. They understand now that they have to work with us. They have to work with many countries in the world beside the United States. And every country in Europe now is finding the way to cooperate outside the continent. We are the future for many countries in Europe. But it will take time till we have a strong economy and go through all this storm.
Indeed. We'll come to Egypt. And because definitely we are very much concerned with Egypt, particularly the recent period. And we have seen some of the regional crises also emerging, plus the world ones. Let me take here your reading to the Egyptian policy and diplomacy at large.
Well, we have gained lots of experience in the war against terrorism, because we had the whole world against us at a certain time, back in 2013, and they saw that we were against what they called human rights, and then they understood, especially the United States and Europe, they understood that we were defending our sovereignty and our security, and they did the same thing when they were hurt and they drank from the same cup. So now I think that we went through difficult moments lately, especially in Sudan, as we went through difficult moments in Libya. These are critical situations because we have this specificity in the Middle East and in Africa, the tribal, the tribal character in Libya and in Sudan. It's not easy dealing with one part. You have to deal with several parts. Even when South Sudan gained independence, at that time, we had to work between the faction inside the same country who got independence from another country to make them listen to each other. So it's very complicated because it's not our culture also. We don't have this tribal culture in Egypt. So it takes a lot of effort to understand how the Libyans work, how to rally them towards one goal, and the same thing in Sudan. The problem is that we are also facing international interference. They are intervening in the politics of these countries. What's happening in Sudan is not from day one. It wasn't came just like that. We all know there is external forces acting inside. Same thing in Libya. Same thing in Gaza even. The escalations, we know who gave the orders to escalate, all that. So we are living in a region which is tribal region, which is full of factions, and also it's the hub and the interest of all the Western and not Western, all the superpowers.
Indeed, Dr. Cherif, we are living or surrounded by very, very turbulent, a very, very turbulent region. However, I have to say here that despite that we are not having a tribal culture, or a factional one, or even a racial one, because we are united, thank God. And this is the harmony that Egypt has been living ever since in history. However, all keys were always in Egypt. For instance, how we've seen the mediation of Egypt in the Gaza ceasefire, the latest of how Egypt dealt with the situation. For instance, how Egypt has dealt with the Syrian file. For instance, how Egypt dealt with the Sudanese file. How do you view how Egypt's, or the approach of Egypt towards such files? Because those are important files, each and every one of them.
We have a clear vision, and this is our power. We have a clear vision in our diplomacy, and our clear vision is one word: sovereignty. We worked for the national army, or creating a national army in Libya. No factions fighting, and we endorsed Marshal Khalifa Haftar for that. In Syria, we strengthened, and up till now we are talking about one territory of the Syrian country. The people of Syria will decide about what they will do in their internal politics, but we will not accept that Idlib will be occupied by Turkey now. And the same thing we have done in Iraq. We worked with the government elected and formed. We never, ever in Egypt worked with factions.
Or militias.
Or militias.
Or terrorism organizations.
We work with the legitimate governments ruling the countries.
Indeed.
we could have differences, as we had with President Bashar al-Assad. We had differences, political differences with him, but still we said we should not forget that he's the ruler of the country and there is a sovereignty that we have to protect.
Indeed. Before we move on, let's have this second report. And since President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi has taken office, he was keen to prove that Egypt is open to the world. The main feature of Egypt's foreign policy is openness to all countries, benefiting from all experiences, building partnerships and bridges of cooperation with all countries all over the world that have common interests with Egypt. Let's watch.
Egypt's foreign policy under President al-Sisi witnessed a historic boom that had never happened before, as Egypt's foreign relations extended at the African, Arab, Asian and European levels, which was reflected in the president's foreign activities and many visits since he assumed the presidency, which restored Egypt's position and leadership among the world countries. Egypt's foreign policy is also clearly manifested in the tours of Foreign Minister Sameh Shoukry and also his talks with world's top officials. Egypt has always been supporting countries of the African continent where relations between Egypt and the African countries witnessed a qualitative development to achieve consensus in visions and coordination in common positions in various forums. Egypt's assumption of the chairmanship of the NIPAD Steering Committee from the Rwandan president, with the unanimousness of committee members to support the Egyptian candidacy, is a culmination of the Egyptian political leadership and its continuous work for the development of the African continent. On the Arab level, during President al-Sisi's latest meeting with the delegation of heads of Arab councils and parliaments, he stressed Egypt's support for efforts to enhance parliamentary cooperation among Arab countries in order to contribute to the exchange of experiences and push forward the process of integration among the Arab states. President al-Sisi also reiterated the importance of maintaining solidarity among the Arab states, expressing Egypt's keen interest to strengthen joint Arab relations and support all Arab countries in their development, stressing that the stability and peace of each Arab country is part of Egypt's stability and peace. President al-Sisi's latest Asian tours, which began with India passing through Azerbaijan and then Armenia, proved Egypt's balanced foreign policy with all countries and reflected the state's endeavor to expand its relations and to build new partnerships in light of his vision, which focuses on deepening relations with friendly countries in all fields and attracting more investments. Egypt's focus on the Asian axis in its foreign policy comes side by side with its relations with Europe and the US and is based on balanced and diversified sources of political, strategic and economic alliances, as well as creating new circles in the Egyptian diplomacy. President al-Sisi's visit to India is based on the background of the extended bilateral relations, as the Egyptian-Indian ties are starting a new era, described by the Indian Prime Minister as the stage of strategic partnership. President al-Sisi is working to implement the strategy of turning to the east and reviving cooperation not only with India and China but also with the Central Asian countries, and this was shown during his visit to Azerbaijan. In the meantime, President al-Sisi is the first Egyptian president to visit Armenia since the establishment of the diplomatic relations between the two countries in 1992, and this comes in light of the president's keenness to achieve balance and diversity in Egypt's foreign relations in order to maximize its economic, military, cultural, scientific and political interests. Also, in light of Egypt's openness to expanding and diversifying its strategic partnership with Europe, and also its keenness on increasing trade exchange on one hand and enhancing energy security on the other, President al-Sisi has received the President of Croatia, a country which is one of the southern gates of the European Union. And on the level of the Egyptian-American relations, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken said during his last meeting with President al-Sisi in Cairo that Washington is counting on close coordination with Egypt under President al-Sisi's leadership, and he also spoke about the framework of the strategic relations between the two friendly countries.
Right, welcome back, and back to you, Dr. Cherif. And Egypt has different spheres to that it plays its role within. We have the Arab world, we have Europe, we have different powers, but I mean here the Arab world and Africa, because those are two top priority files for Egypt. How do you view the policy of Egypt towards both regions, particularly in the past period? Yes, indeed, Egypt has been playing a very pivotal role in areas, particularly of conflicts. But how do you view the Egyptian role that has been played so far?
Well, it's a major role, because I think that if Egypt wasn't that strong, I think that many disasters would have happened in the region. We are still the source of stability. Look, for instance, when they have internal problems before in Sudan and even in Libya, they used to come to Cairo to negotiate and to talk between them. And we host these. We did the same thing with between the Palestinian factions to unite them, between Hamas and the Palestinian Authority. We opened the doors for all these oppositions and the rivals to come and talk in Egypt. So this gave an oxygen to the region. After all, this is our neighborhood, and we have to, let's say, not live in peace, but have the maximum security that we could have.
It's our national security as well.
Egypt has national security since 7,000 years. In the north is Syria, and in the south till Ethiopia, and then the west till the end of Libya. And we all know that Sinai and Gaza and the rest, it was always Egypt's eastern security. So, and the Mediterranean, of course. So we have huge burden. Every ruler comes to lead Egypt has this burden to ensure the security. If not, we have seen through history how they waited the moment that Egypt would fall to attack. So that's why we have...
To attack who?
To attack the Egyptian nation.
Only? Or the whole area?
The whole area has been attacked since the 20th century, when there was the French and the British mandate, and these countries were created. Lebanon, they had 19 factions in the same country, little country, and Syria divided, and Iraq, and all that, and the Gulf states. These were big countries. They didn't have all these separations and boundaries. Egypt was the only one untouched for several decades. So the whole area, we started since 1952 with the Pan-Arabism to urge every country to work with us, to work together. We gave the power to the Arab League.
Let me take it from this word that has been always said by big powers and by everyone, that Egypt is the cornerstone for stability of the region and the continent.
That's true.
And hence came this pressure on Egypt all the time. Why is Egypt the cornerstone of the Middle East and Africa? And what does this require from us and our brothers in the continent and the region?
Well, because Egypt was, through history, the cultural hub. We had the Greeks, we had the Romans, we had the Arabs, the Turks. Everyone was present in Egypt. So we were a fertile country, open culture here in Egypt. We never, as up till this hour, refused any refugees. We open our borders to everyone. We accept everyone. That's why we have this strength. Although we could have difficulties, still we make the sacrifice because it's our tradition. and we want to keep it. So that's why we are the cornerstone. They could, for instance, some countries could dislike Egypt, but I know very well, once they will have wars, they will flee to Egypt. They will come to us.
Actually, it's not about just fleeing, but how Egypt served the causes, the Arab causes, and at the same time, not just the refuge for those who are fleeing their countries, but also the one that have the key for the solutions.
Yes.
How, from your point of view, has Egypt served the Middle East and the African continent from different spheres?
Look, in 1979, when we signed the Camp David Accords...
Actually, I don't want to take it from that long, but
I have to
yes,
give concrete
please.
examples. We were criticized, but at that time we had a vision, and we said, once we will put the first cornerstone of peace, is Egypt. Peace will be, or wars will be less in intensity in the Middle East. That's what we have done. We have gave an example of negotiations, of peace. We have gave the example to defend also the rights of other peoples. We have gave the rights also, or the voice of the Palestinians at a certain time. When Libya was in the Arab Spring almost destroyed, we said, no, it's not over, and we have to find a solution to bring in the army there to work to defend the country from terrorism. We have done the same thing in South Sudan and in Sudan. We are present in even humanitarian questions, whether there are floods, whether there are destructions anywhere.
We were not always present. There has been some negligence during a period of time, during some 30 years
Neglected
for Africa.
Africa, yes.
And even relations in the Arab world were not that. But
Yes.
anyway, if I may say, the situation of Egypt, particularly as it links Europe, Africa, the Middle East, and how it is working within all these spheres in order to be for cooperation and coordination among all those areas.
Look, we had this opportunity that we had these relations with all the powers in the same time, whether at the Cold War or after. We had relations with the Soviet Union at the time and the West at the same time in the 1970s and 80s. And then we were cooperating with every country in, I'm saying outside the Middle East and outside Africa. So we gained this, let's say, this trust from outside world, which is also reflecting in the Middle East. For example, let me give you the example of 2 days ago, the last 48 hours. Egypt brought a ceasefire in Gaza. Who thanked Egypt? It was the United States. So this gives Egypt...
The United Nations also.
And the United Nations. And the Palestinians and the Israelis. They all thanked Egypt because it was escalating. It was going to a dead end and starvation for the population. They were about 24 hours and they won't have gas for the electricity. So we saved all this. So when we do so, it reflects our positions. It gives us prestige in this region. They listen to us afterwards.
That's because we have the keys, as I said. Let me take it from here. During the past few years and under the leadership of President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, how do you view how our foreign policy shaped up? And I don't have, I just have a few minutes left.
If I can portray it, it's like a ship in the sea, stormy sea. We went through many storms, but we had a clear vision, and we still have a clear vision that sovereignty is the key, and every nation, we endorse other nations. As President Sisi said it, we never worked against the sovereignty of other countries. On the contrary, we help other countries maintaining and preserving their own integrity.
And regaining also.
And regaining their sovereignty. So this is our foreign policy. It's sovereignty, security, and stability.
And I'm just quoting the President here as he's saying that we are dealing with a very integral diplomacy, a true integral one.
Yes.
Unfortunately, my time is out and I have to end it here. Dr. Cherif, I know this episode needed hours and hours to speak about, but we have to end it here. So Dr. Cherif Amir, Professor of International Relations, we thank you so much for being with us and for your input. Always a pleasure.
Thank you.
Dear viewers, many thanks for watching. Tomorrow will be another important topic with another colleague. Good night.